So welcome to my James Project. I'm Michael James. I'm so excited to come to you again with an exciting topic about what's happening in the world. And today I want to dive into what's going on in Ukraine. And right now, I know this is going to be a little bit political, but I'm not speaking in terms of politics. I'm speaking in terms of an outsider and from what I see in my perspective. And what I think we need to be careful of and where we are today in this DNA and in this time in the world. I think the war in Ukraine should be stopped, irrespective of what side you are on or you're standing, whether you're on the west or you're on the north or you're on the south, wherever anybody is in this world today, whether you're African, American, European, or Ukrainians, or whether you're Russians. If you're a Russian citizen, I think if there's anything that you can do or you can say, the war should end. And that a lot of people, and I know that some people could think that, who is this guy and why does it think that, the war should end? I'm telling you, there's something that's happening in the world today. Irrespective from where you are, if you are a Russian, the war should actually end. You should create any kind of pressure that you can, and you should speak if you have to. And this is my why. We are in a pivot point of our existence as human beings. The war that Russia and Ukraine that's happening between Russia and Ukraine is not a war about insurgents. You're not fighting a war of terrorism. Okay, this is an actual war between Russia and a sovereign nation, which is Ukraine. And it's not a war against terror. Let's look backward. When America had to fight the war on terror, and they had to go to the Middle East, and I mean blanket the whole of Middle East. I remember George W. Bush. They actually even set the what's it called? The oil field on fire. Saddam Hussein was running for his life. It was a mess. And back then it was like a war of revenge, and it was necessary that needed to happen. There was a clear insurgence, even though it was also, Iraq was a sovereign nation. But what they were doing was totally against the standard of how the West will see things and how terrorism, the rise of terrorism. It was clear terrorism. It's two different things when you're fighting a terrorist group and when you're fighting a nation. So the point I'm trying to make is this. Irrespective of where you stand, if the war in Ukraine does not end, it's heading to a disaster not only for Ukraine but the whole of Europe, and it's going to spiral to every part of the world. And that was what happened in Iraq. It was a war that America wanted to get in, and they thought that we would get in and we would get out between a certain window of time. But it became a war that became politically debated, and it became a chaotic process that they went in, but they can no longer go out. That they spend a lot of money and investment, and what tanked American economy was the start of the war. The debt that currently ballooned in the history of America right now did not start today. They could point back to, it was this president, it was that president, it was that president. No, it started because of the war, financing of the war. When George W. Bush left office, Obama came. When he came into office, he needed to raise deficit because the economy has tanked. It needed to raise deficit so that he could bail back the system and put back people to work and be able to build the economy. Barack left and Trump came in, inherited what happened in Barack and what Barack did not accomplish. And it was, what Barack did was to try to put an end to the war in Iraq, to try to bring the troop back, even though they try to put an end to the war, but automatically things were not actually over. So Trump has to now raise deficit as well to be able to cover excessive of the damage that was still left in Obama administration. And Trump left. Before Trump left, another problem arose in the world, which was a pandemic. So one problem in the past was not actually fully fixed. And another problem came, which was the pandemic, which from one recovery to another recovery and to another problem. So things keep spiraling out of control that eventually ballooned the debt till today. That even though they try to cut deficit, because when you look at what has been invested in the military because of the constant war that was fought in the Middle East, it becomes difficult to cut back on those expenses. This will happen to Russia. Russia is not just fighting a small enemy or fighting a country like Ukraine that thought it's small. No. And if the war continues, whether Russia has all it takes to go in and say they're going to blanket Ukraine, it will not be the hand. Whether they unseat the sitting president right now, it's not going to be the hand. It's an endless war, and eventually will bring down Russia. To most people, they see it from a superpower point of view, but they do not understand where this is headed to. Ukraine is not an insurgent. Ukraine is a sovereign nation, under United Nation umbrella, has a seat in United Nation, and at the same time belongs to every fears and phase of every country, has diplomatic missions everywhere in the world. It is not an insurgent. The people, another example I like to give to you, to anybody who thinks this is just going to come in and it's going to be easy for Russia to get things done. No, it's not going to be easy. Whether you want to put that in the same equation, like what happened between Israel and Hamas. Hamas is an insurgent that was funded by just a few proxy of people. Okay? It's different. And when you look at a group like Hezbollah that has massive weapons and funding, you cannot still compare that with Ukraine. Ukraine has the backing of NATO. So indirectly, no matter what Russia tries to fight, will not get the victory that he actually needs. And whether he chooses to say he's going to blanket Ukraine or take out whoever is in power in Ukraine, Russia is going to get to a point where its society is going to be destabilized. Destabilized in the sense that right now it's one-sided. But if the restriction that has been placed on Ukraine is lifted, it's going to be two-sided. That means people are going to die in both sides, not only military people. And if that keeps happening in Russian society, it's going to bring down the country. It's that simple. So it's not a win-win. There's no, I'm a superpower, I'm going to win. And the war that was fought back in the Iraq war that was fought back then, the wars today are different. The wars that are fought today, we can already see that they are totally different. So Russia's not going to have it that easy. If it's from the look at things, even right now, even with all the limitations that's been placed on the other side, even right now, there's still a level of limitation that pain that Russia feels. So what is the use of continuing a war that eventually is going to bring down a whole nation as powerful and stronger as Russia? And it's going to bring the people down and destroy the economy. Russia isn't fighting insurgents. Russia is fighting a well-equipped army and backing from military financial allies. It's different from Hamas. It's different from Hezbollah. It's different from even the Iraq war. It's not going to go down well for Russia. That is what I can see. And it has to stop. There's nothing there to fight for. There's nothing to protect. And when I look back at history and not going so much into the Soviet Union or whatever happened, that was the past. And anybody that think that this is going to be an exciting war that's going to end in Europe is lying. Whatever, look at what happened. Everything that happened when the pandemic came, I was in Asia. And I thought, okay, It's something that is not going to bother anybody. So that means what happened in China, we're hearing it over China. It's never going to come close to. It took few months. We were all involved in the same thing that happened somewhere in some part of the world. The same thing is going to happen with this case of Russia and Ukraine. It's going to spiral out of control. And we are in a crossroad of humanity. We are in a crossroad of humanity. There's a transition of something that's going on, and there's something that today the world, everybody, we talked about growth and economy a few years ago, a decade ago. Everything was about growth, economy, integration. Today we're talking about war, military investments, the highest that has ever been done before. Today we talk about decoupling. We talk about every country today in the world after the pandemic are decoupling one way or the other. Everybody, that's why you see the current war order being fluctuating, because every country now after the pandemic no longer see each other the same way they saw. So we are in a crossroad of anybody thinking that the war in Russia and Ukraine is going to end there. If Russia goes in and blanket Ukraine, it's going to spiral out of control. Remember before I was born, or before now, back when the proxy war between nations, between borders and borders, whereby people were seizing land, we're heading back to that direction. The human existence is like a cycle. It repeats itself. And we're heading to that place whereby the event of humanity is going to repeat itself, whereby we will recalibrate ourselves backward. When the pandemic happened, what happened was that it brought back the part of humans that was already forgotten. Forgotten in the sense that we never knew that. I read about the Black Plague. I read about when medicine was discovered. I read about when there was no cure for malaria. There was no cure for AIDS. There was no cure for anything. There was no penicillin. I read about all of that. But I didn't live in those times. So I lived in the time whereby things were, I came in a time where things were already done. So it's basically whatever I need I could get, but there were people that lived during the time whereby they have to leave fighting. And today we're finding it difficult. And if you look at the structure of the world today, it's becoming difficult for countries to even make peace, to accept peace. At one point, it was an easy thing to do. But today, it's much difficult for countries to make peace. Even with the long existence of the United Nations, it's much difficult. With the more collaborations, the more integrations that humans and countries have become, the more difficult it is to make peace. You look at the Middle East. As much as everybody sits and negotiate, but the war between Israel and Hamas still does not come to an end. Why is that? Why is it that the more we're integrated as humans, the more it becomes even difficult to solve problems? Why do they talk about climate change, but nobody believes that? Why is it so difficult for an understanding between one nation? We're in the world, we're back to that space where the powerful takes from the less powerful. The war in Ukraine, the reason why I'm saying all of this is that anybody who just sit down and have a wishful thinking and think Russia is going to win the war in Ukraine. Trust me, Russia is going to lose the war in Ukraine. When I mean lost, the same thing that happened when America went into Afghanistan and can't get out will happen to Russia. So eventually it's of no use, because you get into a zone and you can't get out, and eventually your people are wiped out at the same time. What was better between the American getting into Afghanistan was that America is in a different continent. Afghanistan was in a different continent. Now imagine if Afghanistan was at the same borders like America. like Canada and America on the same continent, people in America would have died, aside from the soldiers. The bomb would have flown between both sides. It wouldn't have been just one way. Russia is not in a position right now that it should continue fighting. Whatever they can take, whatever negotiations they can make, they should make and get out and let the war just end, because it's gonna spiral. We're in a tipping point in history, and they know it very well. And a country like Russia, with its power, with its people, with what they have, doesn't really need this. I'll see you in my next video. If this video makes sense for you, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.